Ayo, proverbial boy coming at you today with some sort of white garment. And today, I want to relate to you the absolute imperative necessity of finding a way to engage with the world, particularly as it relates to your profession, that's meaningful to you. Now look, I have a lot of friends from all different kinds of social strata from, I've got some friends who are kind of street, if you will, and then I've got other friends who are multimillionaires and everything in between. And some of these people are happy, some of these people are kind of depressed, not super happy with their lot in life. And it doesn't really matter what social strata they're in, but the correlation, the key here, regardless of, with all the happy people, is they found a way to engage that has personal meaning for them, that gives them the impetus to get up and keep going day after day after day, and not just kind of get ground down by the world. And again, this is for people who make very little money and for people who make a lot of money. And for some of these multimillionaire friends of mine, particularly guys in finance, are very challenging, stressful positions that require a lot of hours, especially at the beginning when you're first getting into it. A lot of these people, they just feel like their life is meaningless. And, and one key thing that you're gonna hear me say here is like, at a certain point, if you hate what you're doing for 12 hours a day, there's no magical paycheck number that suddenly makes it a good job. Now, you may disagree with that. You may have, opinions on that. But at the end of the line, it's what I've personally found to be true. So in this video, I'm going to go over again the necessity of why it's important to find meaningful work and how to go about that process. So before we get into it, however, make sure to click on that link below and go to charismamastery.com to learn about how to remove the internal entanglements that are preventing you from expressing yourself when you're out, even if you know technique like the back of your hand. Sometimes you go out and you know what to do, and I see this in clients all the time. They've been engaging with the material for many years. They know what to do, but something's just stopping them internally. And you know that you should be taking action. You feel the paralysis take hold, and you just feel like a punk ass because you know you should be taking the action. You're witnessing yourself almost like from a third-person perspective, just punking out. So if you want to never feel that again, and you want to see the manifestations in your life of improved expressiveness, of improved charisma from your friends, your family, your relationships, your work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, again, go to charismamastery.com right now, and I'll see you there. So having said all that, enjoy the vid. Let me ask you a question. How many people in here are college graduates? How many people in here are attending like a school right now? How many people are attending what they consider to be a very prestigious school? Right? Where are you guys going? The ones where are you going? USC. It's considered pretty widely regarded as a high-ranking school. Yeah. UCSB. Yeah, sure, whatever. So but so I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends who have attended, like Harvard, Yale, like high-ranked business schools and things like that. And what's the conventional wisdom on that? Like, what is that like a ticket to? It's a ticket to wealth. It's a ticket to influence. It's a ticket to power. It's a ticket to a deeply fulfilling career path. Now, for those of you who have attended those schools, was there a hand over here as well? So you're currently attending it? Yeah. Anyone who has graduated from like one of those schools? Not yet. So yeah, we have a pretty young demographic. But personally, like I have many peers of mine from back in the day, like old friends from childhood and stuff like that, who attended some of these really highly ranked colleges, universities. And now like 20 something years later, a lot of these people are actually not very happy at all with how things turned out. Why do you think that is? Logical thinking? Well, for example, I've had cases like among my friends who they graduated from business schools, they became entrepreneurs, and they got just screwed over by their partners. I knew one guy who was in the hospital, and while he was in the hospital, his partner stole the business out from under him. People getting sued by clients, things of that nature, pushed out of their company by like these Machiavellian political maneuvers and office politics and stuff like that. So, and even like those are some really obnoxious, egregious stories. But beyond that, a lot of people I find in these kind of high-paying jobs that have graduated from these, prestigious places, they just have a general sense of disaffect, right? A general sense It's not as extreme. Maybe they had to miss a funeral or something, or they missed their kid's birthday, or it causes a rift in their relationship, they're divorced. Things like this, like minor things, or they just kind of don't, it's just boring. The stuff that they're doing is boring and it feels utterly meaningless. How many people in here have a job that they find that they could attribute those characteristics to? It feels kind of boring and meaningless what you're doing. That's very surprising. I would think it would be a lot higher. In fact, recent polls indicated that only 40% of the American workforce has a job that they feel is like deeply fulfilling and rewarding. 40%, right? I mean, maybe some people think that that's a good number. It doesn't sound like a very good number to me. You know, I had a friend who worked in the East Coast, and he's kind of I jokingly refer to him as a douchebag, you know, because he's like a highfalutin finance guy, right? So he manages funds and things of that nature. And the hours that this guy has to work are utterly insane, especially when you're first starting, you know? And he has to, you know, manage several $1 million and place this stuff every single day. But if he doesn't, he feels like he's playing catch up. His coworkers are all these very Machiavellian, like backstabber people, essentially. And he said to me once, he's like, I feel like I'm wasting my life. Like at the end of the day, when you die, is anyone gonna care that you made like an extra percentage point of return? Is anyone gonna care about that? No, it's not gonna matter at all. So if you spend 12 hours a day doing something that you hate, there's a certain point where it doesn't matter what it says on your paycheck, right? It's like there's no magic salary at which a bad job becomes a good one. So the thing is this, like, look, and furthermore, this is another thing. A lot of these guys, it's really sad because even though they realize what's happening here, they have an inability to extricate themselves from the situation. Why is that?
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. They feel stuck. In many cases, yeah?
False security.
Sense of security, fear, et cetera, but in many cases, they've also locked themselves into a lifestyle that demands that they retain that similar amount of income. Like, so even if they wanted to go like work for some startup or follow their bliss or whatever the case may be, it's like they got the kids, they got to pay for the kids' education, they got this, they got the payment, the house payment, and they just can't get out of it. So what I'm trying to get at here is just like, especially for you younger guys, this is very important. You want to be cognizant of this before you actually start to, you know, genuinely enter the workforce. So, you know, look, ultimately, your work should be what? Meaningful. That is the primary driver of job satisfaction. It's got to be meaningful. So what does that mean? Like, how would you define a meaningful endeavor?
You're excited about it when you wake up. You're looking forward to doing it.
Okay.
You're helping other people.
Helping other people. These guys like nailed it. Like, in my opinion, this is what it is. If you're helping other people in some capacity, then you'll feel that it's actually meaningful to the world at large. So there was a study that I read about from 2001 where there was they went to some hospital where the janitorial staff was incredibly upbeat and just loved their jobs. So they interviewed all the janitorial staff, and what they found was these people, they didn't view their job as just like cleaning up puke or whatever, right? Cleaning up other people's messes. Many of these people that they interviewed, like one woman, for example, she worked in a ward with traumatic head injury patients, like brain trauma. And many of these people were like comatose states and, you know, various states of sort of like a inability to perceive. So what she would do, she would actually take it upon herself to like move the pictures around, and she would talk to them and things like this. Or she would like entertain the families of these people when they came. So in her mind, she's not just this janitor. Part of her job is helping these patients, and that caused a very, very deep satisfaction among like the staff. So that was generally what they found. Now, I work with people personally who have degrees from very prestigious places. Like, you guys know Derek? He graduated from one of the top business schools in the world. Which one did he? I forget what it is. Chicago, something or other. I don't even know. I'm not sure. Wharton, something like that. But he always, if he was here, he'd tell you a lot. He'd tell you several times. And, you know, he's very satisfied with his work. Why? Because he's uncompromising. Like, he's not going to lock himself into a situation where he feels his work is meaningless. That guy is very, very uncompromising. Now, I also work with a lot of people who dropped out of school, like myself, or who just came from a very kind of rough background, if you will. And me personally, I learned these lessons about embracing meaningful work very, very early on. You know why? Because I didn't have the option, man. Like, I didn't have a degree. I dropped out of school. I had to struggle and scrabble and hustle to get to this point. And I learned these lessons about meaning very, very early on. You know, I had a variety of just menial jobs and stuff like that. And I found it just deeply disaffecting. So I had to learn this stuff early on. So in many ways, I feel like my rough tumble background, or whatever the case may be, it was like successful because it wasn't the easiest path. Like, taking the easiest path often fails to teach you this lesson. So look, like I said, some of my friends that I have, like these guys that I know that have very high paying jobs, either in tech, like on the West Coast it's tech, on the East Coast it's finance, and everything in between. Like, a lot of these guys have, not all of them, but some of them have expressed almost a jealousy that I had the balls to go and do something that I felt was personally meaningful. But you know what? Like, it wasn't really courage. I didn't need courage to do this because I had no other option, right? So the thing that I would leave you with on this, it's like this bad luck made it very, very easy to get into a field that I loved. You know, like my bad roll of the dice with my upbringing and stuff like that. But you got to find like you got to find your niche where you're bringing meaning. And often the best teacher of that is life. So again, I'd really encourage you to not take the easy way out, not take like just the prestigious job right away necessarily. Does it make sense? Yes.
I just have a comment about what you just said about life purpose.
Yes. Can you talk louder?
Yeah, so there's there's courses on the internet and stuff for specifically finding what would be meaningful for you and still be authentic to you. And so I think it's really hard to figure that out just through life. Like,
yeah.
You know, because people who are better off than you had a lot of trouble finding that, right? So, yeah, I just say that.
What are where do you find these? Like, how do you know where it is?
The one that I took was on a website called actualize.org.
Actualized. Interesting.
I'm sure there's other ones, but I did pay $250 for it. Like, you're not gonna just get it free.
Do you feel that it was helpful?
Yes, extremely.
Extremely helpful. So what he said there, for those of you who were unable to hear, was that sometimes this process of discovering what's going to be a meaningful career path for you can be kind of daunting. It's confusing. You don't really know necessarily where to start, especially if you're a younger person. However, there are resources that you can look up and Google on the internet to discover, like basically it's a test that guides you through a series of questions that helps you sort of suss out what's going to be the most meaningful path for you. So check it out. You know, hopefully it's helpful to you and it'll just avoid waking up at 45 and just feeling that you've wasted your life. Because it is very possible to do that. I know people who have lived their life and they felt that they wasted it. You know, my father actually was one of those people. Now, granted, he wasted his life by participating in criminal acts and things like that, going to prison. But he got out of prison and he never really recovered. I was estranged from my father for 25 years. He died 2 years ago. And I went to his house in suburban Illinois because I'm the heir, you know, and so I had to sort through the belongings and so on and so forth. And what I was able to discover from talking to like my cousins and who knew him and stuff out there was that after he retired, he had just kind of given up. And I read some of his journals and stuff. And the basic takeaway, I guess, was that he truly felt that he had wasted his life. It is possible to arrive at a point where you feel you've wasted it. Now, one thing I always talk to Julian about, because we've been through some tough times, he and I, like some things that only we can relate to, you know, in terms of being lambasted and raked over the coals in scandals and things like that. But there's always a better future if you're willing to wait it out. And the thing that you think might be the most awful thing right now could become the most beneficial thing to ever have happened to you in retrospect. Like all of those things that happened to me when I was younger, it seemed like a nightmare at the time, like an absolute nightmare at the time. But if you gave me the opportunity to go back and possibly change it and stop those things from happening, I wouldn't do that. I mean, obviously you can't, so it's kind of just a moot masturbatory mental exercise, but still, given the opportunity, I would not do that, because it's made me who I am today. So even that taught me, even in the darkest times, it can be the chrysalis or the beginning of a metamorphosis into something better, right? But he kind of figured that he had just given up. Like he's from what I read, he's like, my kids hate me, everyone hates me, I screwed up my life. So what that made, I used to view him as this kind of monster who did all these things to us and so forth. But after I saw how he was living and I read these thoughts and talked to people who knew him, I just felt bad for him. You know, I felt really bad for him actually. Like just sad, you know, that he could have changed it, but he didn't. But it made me think. You know what it made me think? Where am I doing that in my life? Like what is my blind spot? Like, where am I interacting with my friends and my family and these little 1% things that add up over time that are starting to alienate them or starting to make them not want to be around me? Because I never want to end up in that place. You know what I mean? And I think it was very, very helpful for me to actually go out there and process that stuff. So you want to live your life every single day with the knowledge of how can I help these people that are around me? How can I help my friends, my family, my coworkers, et cetera, and just be a force that's going to spread positivity and not just, you know, again, retreat into this sort of bitter shell of regret, if that makes sense. Yeah.
You know how yesterday you talked about how you were giving boot camp to a guy in his 40s and you thought that his behavior had been so calcified that he couldn't really get out of it. Do you think that, like in that case, if it's not too personal, do you think your dad could have changed his life around?
Well, I think anyone can, but here's the thing about that. It's kind of interesting because when I read his journals and stuff, for the period he wrote this very detailed, I guess, autobiography type document, and in the time period where he went to prison and stuff, it was just not there. It was just like file not found. Like it didn't get written. He was like, oh, here's this, and now I'm out and I'm here. And in fact, he had lied to my family and stuff like that. Because after that happened, it was as though that side of the family had died in a plane crash or something. Like they just didn't speak to me, ever after that. I mean, I talk to him now because what had happened is that when he got out of prison, he went back there and he said to them, like, what happened? He's like, oh, I was in jail. I got in a fight or something. Like he just made up some lie. Like got in a fight. It's a little more involved than that, bro. Like, so, you know. And so when I told the extended family what had happened, they were just shocked. So I think for him to have come back, it would have required him to acknowledge and take on responsibility for what had happened. And I even spoke to him briefly once, like after he got out of prison and on the telephone. And I just wanted to hear him say, like, I'm sorry, man, you know? But he maintained innocence to the day he died. You know, he was just he refused to face up to it. So I think for this boot camp student, he has to get to a place where he can acknowledge certain aspects of my personality are kind of disempowering. And I might want to discard those and start to embrace like a more welcoming or accepting worldview. Because I remember on the last night, he just wouldn't approach. He's just standing at the bar. And again, I go through a variety of ways to attempt to get him to approach. You know, maybe I'll approach with him, or I'll do what we call daddy provides, where I talk to someone and then I introduce him. You know, I kind of pre-warm it up and then introduce him. But he's just like, these people are weird. I don't like it. I don't like it. This isn't me. This isn't me. That's like going to a boxing gym And they're like, all right, here's the lesson. First, you're going to punch me in the face. It's like, well, I don't like punching people in the face. That's not me. Then why are you here? Because that's what it is, man. That's what this is. You got to go talk to people. You got to actually be interested in seeing what they're all about and seeing how you can kind of harmonize with them and bring everything up, a synergistic effect. So, yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me is like, and I have a lot of friends too who engage in a lot of behaviors that I would consider not cool, not healthy for them personally. I have friends who are alcoholics. I have friends who make very, very bad relationship choices very consistently. And these are otherwise like very cool people. And I love hanging out with them. And I try to tell them, you try to tell them. But at a certain point, you can only tell them so much. But rather than, here's the big takeaway though, rather than, when you see that in your own peer group, rather than be like, well, this guy, he's dumb, he sucks, et cetera, be like, where am I doing that? Like, where's my blind spot where everyone's telling me all the time? And I'm just like, nope. Because I guarantee we all have that. We all have those. So just kind of reflect. Listen to your friends. Reflect. Live up to your values. Dig into it. Like it's difficult work sometimes. Like especially for younger guys. Like a big turning point for me was really just kind of writing down. Just even writing down what I feel my kind of core values are. The characteristics I want to embody every day, even when I don't feel like it. And revisit that from time to time, and say like kind of do a mental check-in. Because emotional fitness, it's a lot like physical fitness in the sense that you don't just go to the gym until you get jacked. You're like, oh, ripped out. Like, yeah, problem solved. Stop going to the gym. Like it's like going to stay like this forever. You constantly have to chip away at it and maintain that. Okay? So, any other questions on that before we move on? Yeah.
For those of us who are younger,
Yeah.
in school, in college, but we have that call to action to maybe drop out.
The call to action to drop out.
There's that underlying fear of
Look, I think it depends on, like, the reason that I dropped out of school was because I didn't feel a need to be there. I didn't feel the things I was learning were of value. Right? I mean, I was an English literature major. I know a lot of big words. I'm pretty good at that, at knowing big words. That's about it. But I just felt it was summer camp with drugs. That's literally how I felt it was, summer camp with drugs. So if you're there and and the material's engaging to you and you like what you're learning, you think it has value to you personally, don't drop out of school, especially if you're in some sort of technical field, like a medical, medicine or some sort of engineering or something like that. But I would, it's far be it for me to like encourage people to drop out of school. But, if you like it there, stay in. If you don't like it there, maybe even like change the major up, or if you have to, leave. I mean, there's a lot of famous people who dropped out of school, right? And became billionaires. But then there's a lot of people that totally themselves. It's what Robert Greene calls, he extrapolated this from Sun Tzu, but he calls it operating from a death ground. When we started our boot camps and stuff back in the day, basically that's what we were doing. We were burning the boats, right? You've all heard that old chestnut about how Hernan Cortez, he landed in Mexico to begin his campaign of genocide or whatever. And he said, all right, let's set fire to the boats now, soldiers. Why? No going back. Before, these were guys who were, alive, fighting to stay alive, essentially. Now they're basically dead. And if you want to go home, you have to win. There's no other option. So that can be very powerful emotional leverage, powerful way to get leverage on yourself. However, just because you burn the boats doesn't mean you're going to win. It just means if you don't, you're screwed. And I'll often get guys who are like, I did it, Jeff. I quit my job. I told my parents to go screw themselves. Fuck off, mom and dad. I'm on my own, out of school. I burned the boats. I'm like, oh, cool. Cool, man. Oh, fuck. I hope I didn't ruin this guy's life. So take it with a grain of salt. Take it with an absolute grain of salt. Thank you, guys. Yeah, meet me in the back. Pictures come alive, you can dance right through your life. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This program is designed to give you a process to open and sustain charismatic expression with increasing consistency. Remove the obstacles, isolate the skills, exercise them separately, then put them together in a more completely realized whole. How to speak to all the issues surrounding this interrelationship between intuitive and intellectual resources is arguably the most fundamental challenge facing anyone who's attempting to improve their communication skills.
So if you're looking to develop general charisma that you can apply across all areas of life, definitely check out Jeff's Charisma Masters.